The Daycare Attendant is a recurring character in the newer Five Nights at Freddy's installments. He's an animatronic that alternates between the personalities of the cheery sun and the dark moon. In this video, I'll be taking a look at his history in the Five Nights at Freddy's books and games, and speculate where his story could be heading next. While the Daycare Attendant first appears in Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, their story seems to begin in the upcoming prequel game, Secret of the Mimic. According to the people who played the demo at PAX West, there's a sun and moon statue in the game's factory. This installment seems to take place in 1979, meaning that the Daycare Attendant is a very old character. While this might seem surprising at first, a lot of details throughout the series have heavily foreshadowed this. The Daycare Attendant's endoskeleton teeth are very similar to the Mimic's, which is an animatronic endoskeleton created in the 70s. This could imply that the Daycare Attendant was made around the same time. This is also hinted at in Help Wanted. In Security Breach, the moon has the Moondrop Sleepy Time candy, and this also appears in the Help Wanted DLC, Curse of Dreadbear. Help Wanted is a VR game created by Phasma Entertainment, and the Curse of Dreadbear DLC takes place at Fall Fest 1983, which is an old Halloween celebration. In the Curse of Dreadbear DLC, the player can unlock the Moondrop candy, already hinting at the Daycare Attendant existing by the 80s. Help Wanted 2 also ties the Daycare Attendant to Fall Fest, but we'll get to that later. In the Tales from the Pizzaplex story, Bobby Dots Part 1, it's revealed that the Daycare Attendant wasn't created for the daycare. The sun was originally made as an old stage animatronic, and its gimmick was to turn evil when the lights went off. When it was reprogrammed into the Daycare Attendant, the darkness trigger couldn't be removed, and the occasional blackouts in the daycare created the moon side of the Daycare Attendant. This likely means that the Daycare Attendant was made before the Pizzaplex, and we might see this elaborated upon in Secret of the Mimic. In the Tales from the Pizzaplex story, the Storyteller, the Mimic 1 AI program is unleashed into the Pizzaplex systems through the Storyteller. The Storyteller was created by Phasma Entertainment and used the Mimic 1 program to create stories for the Pizzaplex and its characters. However, this resulted in the Mimic 1 AI causing issues across the Pizzaplex. Most notably, the Glamrock animatronic personalities are altered, with Roxy and Monty beginning to behave like they do in the games. It's mentioned that the other Pizzaplex animatronics underwent similar changes, so it's possible the Mimic 1 program caused some of the Daycare Attendant's strange personality traits. The Daycare Attendant has some other cameos in Tales from the Pizzaplex stories. In Somnophobia, there are the Moondrop Dream Spheres. These look like snow globes and have a small moon figure inside of them. In this story, the moon is referred to as Moondrop despite him being called the moon in the games. Anyways, when plugged in, the dream spheres light up and slip people into a hypnotic state that supposedly takes information from their subconscious and brings it more clearly into view. However, if they're used for too long, the user is trapped in this dreamlike state. There's also a scene in the story where the sphere activates without being plugged in, and the main character sees Moondrop in their dream. So it seems like the sphere is somehow alive. In the story, Alone Together, the main character Travis builds a mechanical Turk based on the sun, who he calls the Sun Man. Neither of these matter for the overarching story, but it's pretty cool that the sun and the moon both have stories themed around them. In Security Breach, Glamrock Freddy helps a young boy named Gregory survive and escape the Mega Pizzaplex. Early on in the game when Gregory's trying to regroup with Freddy, he has to travel through the daycare. He slides down into the daycare's ball pit and encounters the sun, who dives into the pit. No pun intended. The sun leaps out and grabs him, but unlike the other characters, he isn't hostile.
You friends, you're sure I'm late. Are we having a slumber party? Where are all your friends? We can finger paint, tell stories, drink fizzy fast until our heads explode, and then stay up all night. There is only one rule. Keep the lights on. On.
After distracting the sun, Gregory runs over to the daycare desk and grabs the security badge. Unfortunately, this turns the lights off, and the sun panics as the moon takes over. Freddy tells Gregory to use the play structure's generators to restore the daycare lights. As he does this, Gregory will need to avoid the moon, who is now free to roam the daycare. At first, the moon will stalk him outside the play structures, but as Gregory powers more generators, the moon grows more hostile, and will enter the play structures. Once Gregory restores power to the daycare, the sun bans him and calls security. Gregory narrowly escapes the Glamrock animatronics by hiding inside of Freddy's chest cavity. As they leave the daycare, it's the end of the hour.
Every hour the power is diverted to the recharge stations. When that happens, the lights go out. And when that happens, the daycare attendant is free to roam the building. It will find you.
Luckily, Freddy and Gregory get to a recharge station and survive. If Gregory attempts to re-enter the daycare, the sun will block the slide and call for security. The sun also blocks off the other entrances to the daycare with banners reminding Gregory he's banned. The moon doesn't appear again until much later in the game, when Gregory and Freddy are trying to reach parts and service. As they activate the stage lift down to parts and service, the moon appears and hunts Gregory. He manages to get to a recharge station, but Freddy isn't so lucky. The moon attacks him and drags him into parts and service. To rescue him, Gregory must find another security badge in the Endo warehouse, which is decorated with Daycare and moon props. It's shown in Help Wanted 2 that these Endos are essentially children, and the Pizzaplex workers have to teach them for them to mentally develop. Hence all the Daycare props, since the warehouse functions as an Endo nursery. After getting the security badge, Gregory rescues Freddy from parts and service. Shortly after this, they collect a party pass to explore other attractions, and after doing this, it's once again the end of the hour, and the moon hunts Gregory down. Later, after upgrading Freddy with either Monty or Chica's parts, the next hour rolls around, and the moon is free to roam the Pizzaplex. Towards the end of the game, Freddy's upgraded with Roxy's eyes, and after this happens, it's almost 6 AM, and Gregory has to escape before the moon catches him. After he reaches the exit, the moon never appears again. If the player finds all 4 of the Pirate Foxy cutouts and uses the cameras on them, they can access the Daycare Attendant's loft. While the Glamrocks have shiny green rooms, the Daycare Attendant has a dirty loft above the daycare. This is where the son jumped down from when he was introduced. In a side room, there's a Balloon World arcade. It's a fairly simple minigame where you take control of Balloon Boy and have to move up and down to avoid obstacles. The sun appears in the sky during the day, but when it becomes night, the moon appears. Purple glitches appear throughout the minigame, and if the player interacts with them, the arcade glitches out, and the Daycare Attendant is replaced by Eclipse. The Daycare Attendant returns in Help Wanted 2. A majority of this installment takes place in the AR Network's employee training levels. The AR Network is some sort of digital world within the Pizzaplex and Pizza Place, and it can be accessed by wearing the security mask. The main character in Help Wanted 2 has the security mask stuck to their face, which traps them inside the AR Network. Inside of the AR Pizza Place, the protagonist can access the employee training levels, many of which the Daycare Attendant appears in. However, I don't think this is supposed to be the same Daycare Attendant we see in Security Breach, since this is a simulation, but I'll still list all of his appearances. In the Arts and Crafts level, the son instructs the protagonist to make drawings and paper pals. However, the lights start to go out, and if the player accidentally shoots the light bulb icon multiple times, the moon attacks them. Speaking of the moon, he briefly appears in the Bonding Bowl level as one of the randomized threats. The Daycare Attendant also appears in the Carousel Repair level, which starts out with the son talking.
Attention! This carousel is out of service and will require repairs before we open tomorrow. That is the end of my instructions. If I had been programmed with the knowledge to fix it, it would have already been done.
After this, the moon will appear and the player will have to fend them off as they try to repair the carousel. In the hard mode version of this level, the moon is replaced by a new variant, Jacko Moon. He also has a bigger role in the Foxy Log Ride level. If the player shoots the Helpy signs, they go off course and end up in some Halloween areas, where Jacko Moon appears. Something pretty interesting with the Daycare Attendant in this game is that he has a lot of connections to Fall Fest and Halloween. Jacko Moon is pretty self-explanatory. He's the only Halloween character in this game, and his area in the Foxy Log Ride is Halloween themed. The Carousel level on the other hand is less straightforward, but seems to take place at Fall Fest. The area surrounding the carousel has multiple props from the Curse of Dreadbear Fall Fest hub and the Corn Maze, which strongly implies it takes place at Fall Fest. I find it pretty interesting that the Daycare Attendant appears on a Fall Fest level and is heavily tied to Halloween. I think it's possible that the theater show he was created for was at Fall Fest, but we'll just have to wait and see when Seeker of the Mimic comes out. Later in Help Wanted 2, the protagonist unlocks a Faz Wrench, which allows them to open up a storage room in the Pizza Place. Inside is the Princess Quest 4 arcade, which will be important later, and an AR inhibitor. Deactivating the AR inhibitor allows the protagonist to take off the security mask and return to the real world, where they can play levels in the ruined Pizzaplex. After the events of Security Breach, the amalgamation of animatronics in the sinkhole, known as the Blob or Tangle, tunneled out into the Pizzaplex and wrecked it, which resulted in the building being abandoned. With the mask off, the protagonist can see the abandoned Pizzaplex instead of the simulations they've been experiencing. One of the real-world levels takes place in the Daycare Loft, where the protagonist encounters the ruined Daycare Attendant.
You shouldn't be here. Please, just leave me alone. You can make crafts, but then you need to go. I'm perfectly fine where I am. It's better this way. It's safer this way.
The level plays similarly to Arts and Crafts, but when the lights go out, the moon takes over the Daycare Attendant, and the protagonist will have to fend them off with the flashlight. After completing the level, the sun tells the protagonist to leave. If the player collects all the memories across the game, they can play the Princess Quest 4 arcade. The protagonist is pulled into the game and travels through the castle. At the end of the arcade, they enter the sister location elevator and emerge into a giant claw machine with Vanny looking in at them. The moon suddenly drops down and the protagonist hands them the Glitchtrap plush. The moon takes it and gives it to Vanny. The plush then turns into Glitchtrap and Vanny crushes him. She retreats into the darkness and the game ends. The Daycare Attendant's last chronological appearance is in the Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach Ruin DLC. In this installment, Gregory's friend Cassie is contacted by the Mimic, who is an old endoskeleton trapped in the sinkhole under the Pizzaplex. It copies Gregory's voice to trick Cassie into helping it escape. Cassie obtains the security mask from Help Wanted 2, and uses it to access the AR network. Here she's able to deactivate the security nodes keeping the Mimic trapped. During her journey, Cassie ends up in the ruined Daycare. She's attacked by the moon, but she shines her light at him to scare him away. Cassie enters the AR network and the sun drops down next to her. It seems like after Help Wanted 2, the sun has been repressed into the AR network, while the moon remains in control of their body in the real world. The sun asks Cassie to reboot them so they can be whole. The moon tries to take over and attack Cassie, but the sun fights them and tells her to turn the generators on. They then fly away to the top of a play structure. Cassie enters the AR network to turn the lights on, and sometimes the sun will sing a weird song.
No crowns, just go away. No more sun.
Once Cassie turns on the lights, the Daycare Attendant will malfunction and is unable to move. If she enters the AR network while trying to reboot the Daycare Attendant, the sun has some unique voice lines.
No, do it now! Not me, the other me!
When Cassie reboots the Daycare Attendant, they're turned into Eclipse. Judging from the name and the sun's previous comments about needing to be whole, Eclipse is the sun and the moon's personalities fused together. Eclipse flies Cassie out of the daycare, and that's the last we see of him. After Cassie reaches the daycare theater, she can enter the Daycare Attendant's loft. There's a couple interesting details in this location. In the real world, the loft is a mess, but when entering the AR network, it's all neat and tidy. This is because the sun was trapped in the AR network, and appears to have been keeping things clean. The ceiling of the loft also shows Eclipse from Balloon World. The arcade itself is still in the loft, but it isn't functioning. For now, this is the end of the Daycare Attendant's story, but it looks like we'll be seeing them next year in Secret of the Mimic. They might also appear in the upcoming interactive novel Escape the Pizzaplex, which is a prequel story about Cassie prior to the events of Security Breach. The Daycare Attendant is a fan favorite character, so I'm confident we'll see more of them in the series. And companies love making merchandise of him, so I'm sure we'll get more of that. Seriously, there's so much Daycare Attendant merch, it's a little absurd. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and consider buying a super thanks to support us and help fund future content like our upcoming horror game. Thanks for watching, don't forget to follow our socials and check out some of our other videos.